Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football Deal. With Oregon's win against Ohio State, I feel like two teams have emerged as kind of the clear two best teams in the country with Oregon and Texas. And you look at these two teams and say, one, they certainly have the star power to be the best two teams in the country. But what differentiates them from teams like Alabama and Georgia and Tennessee is there's really no glaring hole or question mark that you have with these two teams, too. Now the question is, what team's the best in the country heading into the rest of 2024? Dill, I have a feeling we might see this game get played out at some point. College football playoffs, national championship game. But sitting here right now, we're going to go the best way to do this, the only way the boys know how to do this. Roster battle breakdown, position group by position group, stacking these two teams up. At the end of the episode, we'll give our take on if these two teams play tomorrow or this Saturday. Who are we taking on a neutral site? Fired up to get into it. Before we do, and as always, Texas fans, Oregon fans, just college football fans who might be listening as well, let it fly in the comment section. These roster battle episodes, we did a bunch of them in the offseason. They're an absolute blast. Like a lot of takes, a lot of hot takes. Still, we are certainly not going to agree on a lot of these position battles. Let it fly in the comment section. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Dill, let's start at the top here. Quarterback position, Quinn Ewers, Dillon Gabriel. Who you taking and why?
This is close. I lean Quinn Ewers. I think he has more potential to really light up the stat sheet against really, really great teams. And that's tough to say after Dillon Gabriel just dominated Ohio State and played better than I thought he was almost capable of playing in that type of moment and being able to push the ball down the field and making big-time elite throws. But I still look at Quinn Ewers. I still think the talent, I think his addition into his game of that escapability and some of that playmaking ability, I think puts him over the edge for me. And also, I think the arm talent is on a higher level than Gabriel.
So I would agree with you that who's going to go first in the NFL draft? It's probably going to be Quinn Ewers because of the crazy stuff that he can do with his arm. But if you're asking me right now, what quarterback do I want if we're suiting up and playing on Saturday? It's Dillon Gabriel. I can't believe you started your argument with, I think Quinn Ewers is better suited to put up numbers against great defenses. What did we just see Dillon Gabriel do against what I think might be the best pure defense in the country in Ohio State? Made Denzel Burke look like burnt toast. I mean, that is a secondary that is every single one of them outside of maybe Lathan Ransom is going to the NFL. And Dillon Gabriel was lights out against, again, what I think is one of the best secondaries in the country. You look at Dillon Gabriel and say higher completion percentage, better touchdown to interception ratio, average depth of targets actually higher for Dillon Gabriel than it is Quinn Ewers this year. Dill, I'll grant it, and I'm coming in and saying like Dillon Gabriel's far and away better. I'm not doing that. I maybe got to temper my emotions a little bit. Quinn Ewers has taken that step, and we haven't. There's not a huge.
Quinn Ewers ripped up Michigan too, so we've seen both these quarterbacks rip up some really, really good defense. I just look. Yeah. I think Quinn Ewers, frankly, can do a little bit more. I think there's more in his gas tank when you can ask him to do just about anything. Now, again, Dillon Gabriel, I didn't think he had that type of game in him that he put up against Ohio State, the ability to push the ball like that, make big-time throws very consistently down the field. Because, frankly, I think we've seen him have moments in big spots at Oklahoma that wasn't how he played in that big. So, again, like that's a huge moment for Gabriel that I just think Quinn Ewers, like you've seen him been doing it now for a couple of years. I think he just has a higher ceiling.
I think you've seen Dillon Gabriel been doing it for a couple of years too. You've seen it from Dillon Gabriel, but he's a 6-year senior. I get it. Like you're kind of leaning into the potential of Quinn Ewers, and I'm kind of leaning into what we've seen, especially in 2024. And maybe I'm not giving Quinn Ewers a fair shot because we haven't seen him a ton in 2024. It's close. I'm going DG. You're going Quinn Ewers. Let's move to the pass catchers. And I'll start. I'll put myself on the hot seat first. I'm going to go Oregon. I think you got two top 10 wide receivers in the country on this roster, right? You look at Tez Johnson is like clearly the wide receiver one, and the Oregon fans know we've talked about this. What allows Oregon to reach their real potential on offense is Evan Stewart being treated like wide receiver 1B. And that's what we saw against Ohio State. And I love how this unit complements each other. Like you look at Tez Johnson, where does he excel? Like short intermediate route tree, creating separation, and getting after it after the catch. It is clear that him and Dillon Gabriel are on pretty much the same wavelength. Then you add Evan Stewart, who, Dill, I think is doing what Troy Franklin did for the Oregon offense last year, but is just a little bit more of a well-rounded, better wide receiver. I feel like you even at times forget that 2 years ago, after Evan Stewart's true freshman campaign at Texas A&M, said he's the second best wide receiver behind Marvin Harrison going into the 2023 season. I look at the star power you have with those three wide receivers, and Trayshawn Holden is just a brilliant wide receiver three when he's not spitting on people. I'm going Oregon at the wide receiver room. I have a feeling you're going to go Texas, so I'll give you the floor here to battle.
I'm stunned you think this is a really hot take because I'm going Oregon too. I look at Oregon. I think Tez Johnson's the best wide receiver on this field if these two teams see each other. I mean, again, his ability, he can get over the top on really good corners, what he did to Denzel Burke. He obviously can just get open anytime he runs out. And he has a really good feel for how to play against zone coverage. So I just think he's a super complete wide receiver, makes good plays after they catch. I think he's the best wide receiver. And then I look at Evan Stewart. He's not giving up a whole lot to anyone on that field either. So I think with that 1-2 punch they have, I think the tight end position is kind of a wash with the way Gunnar Helm's playing. I like that wide receiver room for Oregon just mainly by the nature of I think Tez Johnson's the best player on that.
So the reason I say I'm surprised is I thought you'd say Isaiah Bond is the best wide receiver on the football field between these two.
I love Isaiah Bond. You'll find a more bigger fan of him than me, but you look at what Tez Johnson's been doing for the last couple of years. It's really hard to argue he's not one of the better guys.
One of the conversations that is worth noting is you ask me in this 6 weeks, and Ryan Wingo continues to build on what he's doing as a true freshman. Like the conversation, Ryan Wingo, I think, is going to be like a truly special wide receiver. So again, like Texas wide receiver room, pass catch room is really dang good. I think Oregon might have the best pass catch room in the country, though. So I'm going to go Oregon there. Running back, I feel like it would be a different conversation if CJ Baxter was healthy, but I think Jordan James is the best running back. Now, you got to give it a shout out. Like, Texas is making it work. Jaden Blue's been very good. Wisner's been very good at. But you look at Jordan James's number, I mean, averaging over 6 yards per carry, 22 carries of 10-plus yards. That was the narrative that always made me the most angry in the offseason was, all right, who's going to be that all-purpose back for Oregon? Jordan James is just kind of a short yardage back. Like, that's how he was used last year when they had Bucky Irving in the backfield. I had no doubt in my mind that Jordan James averaged over 7 yards per carry last year, that he could be that bell cow, do it all back for Oregon. He was asked to do it against a very good front seven in Ohio State, did it. I'm going Jordan James as the best running back on the field. I like the depth a little bit better for Oregon as well. You got a couple of good backs that you like at Texas, but I feel like this one pretty straight up here.
I agree with that because I do think Jordan James is the only real bell cow, tote the ball a million times, and you can kind of put it in his hands and be comfortable. I will say, I think the fact that Wisner's starting to show an ability to run really strong in between tackles and work in that zone scheme that Texas wants to run is very encouraging because I think that was what you were kind of like wondering what you had when CJ Baxter went down because that's what they needed. I mean, that was what his role was going to be. Jaden Blue is kind of going to be that number 2 who catches the ball really well out of the backfield and is great in space, and he's done that. But I do think Wisner's running the ball at a really high level. I thought against Oklahoma, that was by far his best game. I thought he looked awesome. To me, I think that, like, you asked me 2 weeks ago, I'd probably say it's Oregon easily. Now I do not love Oregon's depth, I don't think, as much as you. I think Whittington's an okay running back. I think you probably want to see more from him if you're Oregon. And you have 2 really good running backs who I think complement each other really well.
That to me seems like, all right, so no Whittington's coming off an injury. I also
Jordan
get the sense
that runs the ball a lot. Like he does so many.
But I get the sense that it's like that's just more of a Jordan James thing than a Noah Whittington thing. So, hey, we don't dislike Noah Whittington. We just don't really want to take Jordan James off the field. That's kind of the vibe I'm getting from Oregon. And Jay Harris, we haven't really seen him. We saw him in the spring game. Liked him a lot. Let's go to the offensive line. At least I'm 3 straight Oregon. You took Quinn Ewers. The Oregon offensive line's figuring it out. Like you asked us a couple weeks ago, it's like Texas by a landslide. The margin's much closer now, but you still have to go Texas. And I think for a couple of different reasons, like talent for talent, I think is pretty dang close. Like you look at a Johnny Cornelius and Josh Connolly Jr. at the tackle spot for Oregon State. Those are 2 guys that are going to be playing on Sundays in 12 months. Why I'm going to go Texas, one, the numbers tell you, right? They've only given up 21 pressures all season, which is insane. But I think more importantly, you look at what makes this offensive line so special. They've played together so much. and that chemistry, the gel that they're showing, it's a little bit different from Oregon. Like we've seen the growing pains of having a new starting center and having some new guys inserted in the lineup. And yeah, Oregon's starting to figure it out from a chemistry standpoint. Texas has been there pretty much all season. They've gone up against some really good defensive fronts as well and kind of like dominated Michigan, did really well against Oklahoma. I feel like Texas, to me, has the best offensive line in the country. So I'm going to go Texas here.
No arguments, not much to add. I mean, Texas is such a hammer up front.
It's like the story for me is like for talent, I really don't think it's that far. I think Oregon has pretty much a whole offensive line that will be playing on Sundays, especially at the offensive tackle spot. But when you're talking about a Texas offensive line that is almost exclusively going into year 3 of playing together, like you can tell when you watch Texas, they don't miss blitz pickups, they don't mix stunts. The communication and chemistry is on the next level. Going over, we got to get this banner out of the way, Dale. Going over to the defensive side of the football, defensive line, I'll give you my I don't know. I'm going to sit on the fence and then I'm going to take one, Dale. I'm taking Texas's defensive line in terms of stopping the run. I'm taking Oregon's defensive line in terms of getting after the passer. I'll reveal my favorite defensive line after you do. Who you got, Texas, Oregon up
Yeah,
front on the
you're
defense?
topping out a little bit there. I think it's Oregon. I think they're real. I think their interior is getting a lot better. Obviously,
Oh yeah,
they now have a guy in Derek Harmon who can really make some things happen. And that, to me, you even look at that Ohio State game, is kind of the difference between that team last year and this year. Is you
yeah.
have that real alpha dog. Caldwell's good. I think Amari Washington, and frankly, Ware Hudson is playing a lot better than I thought he would have played. And you look, they even did all that against Ohio State without Jordan Birch. You saw Mateo. You step up. I still think Tuioti's playing really well. I like what Texas on the defensive line for sure. But I think Oregon's a little bit more complete because I still have some questions about what this Texas D line is going to be on the interior when they play really good offensive lines, who they really haven't seen. Because you look, Michigan's not that unit up front. I don't think they've played great. I think the fact that Broughton's playing really well is huge for Texas, frankly. His emergence is big, but I still think Oregon probably a little bit more complete, and they do have that real game record in the middle now in Derek.
So I'm also going to go Oregon, and I was hoping you go Texas so we can battle it out, but we're both going Oregon here. Not, I think I'm with you, and I think it starts with one huge shout out to Colin Simmons. I don't think we see him on this depth chart. He's still listed on the 3D for some reason. Colin Simmons might be the best edge rusher. I mean, he's been incredible as a true freshman, but you look at just how complete this Oregon defensive line is, and then the emergence of guys like Mateo Yu, and then I'm going to say it, Jordan Birch, the fifth-year senior, but the emergence of Jordan Birch looking like the 5-star prospect we knew he was, and then Derek Harmon, who I think is the best interior defensive line on the football field. This Oregon defensive line is different this year, and I think that's the biggest difference between this Oregon team in 2023 and 2024. And if you're an Oregon fan saying, how do we kind of get over the hump? I think it's going to be because of this defensive line and how good they can be. Moving to the linebackers, I'm going to go Texas. I think they have the best linebacker on the football field in Anthony Hill Jr., a guy that not getting the national media recognition I think he deserves. You look at Oregon and say, they rotate a lot. They play a lot of these different guys, and I think the emergence of guys like Devin Jackson has been massive. Obviously, Jeff Bossa continuing to try to get back healthy. Bryce Betcher's play like they got 4 linebackers that are playing pretty dang good football. But when you have, in my opinion, an eraser at linebacker in Anthony Hill Jr., I think he might be the best linebacker in the country. I'm going to go Texas, but I really do like Oregon's linebacker room as well.
Yeah, I like Oregon's linebacker room, but I think you said it. They don't really have that one guy who's just really dominant. Like I just look at him like he can't take him off the field. He's dominating every play, dominates every situation. Anthony Hill's kind of become that guy. And you look, it's not like their guys next to him are like scrubs. I think Leon Alafu played awesome against Oklahoma.
Yeah,
That was
yeah.
huge. And then David Bender's just been kind of doing it steadily, not really get a ton of fanfare, but he's a really high quality linebacker in my eyes. So again, I think Oregon, like they kind of have a bunch of guys who I see as a David Benda, Leon Alafu. That's kind of the level I feel like most of their linebackers are at. Maybe I just don't think they have anyone like Anthony Hill.
Yeah, and I think that might piss some Oregon fans off. And like I kind of get it because I do think the linebacker room has been playing really well. And like Devin Jackson is starting to put it together. But at the end of the day, when you are
Well, that
compare
shouldn't be
line.
like an insult because if you are compared to David Benda in my eyes, you're a really, really good linebacker.
Yeah, but it's
Still
just like
think I don't think
Anthony Hill Jr. is just, I think, on another level. That kid can really do it all, and he's extremely versatile as well. Go to the secondary, Dill. Texas, massive improved secondary, and you've noted it. Like the emergence or the insertion, I should say, of Andrew Makuba, I think's been huge for this Texas secondary. But I look at Oregon, and it's kind of an interesting conversation for me. I actually went back and forth on who I was going to pick. I like Oregon's cornerbacks better, I think. But Jahdae Barron on the boundary for Texas, I like it. I like it a lot. You look at Jabbar Muhammad's one of the best cornerbacks in the country. Nico Reed's been playing really good football. Brandon Johnson at the nickel spot has been very good for Oregon. Now, I don't think these safeties are elite. I think Kobe Savage is a really solid senior transfer from Kansas State, but I don't think he's a difference maker. But when you have, in my mind, a top 5 cornerback in the country with Jabbar Muhammad and then solid pieces around Jabbar, I'm going to go with the Oregon secondary. But the storyline for Texas is this was their whole like you kind of look at it from last year. Like Oregon's hole was, I think, just the defensive line not being as good as it needed to be, and then you look at Texas, their hole was in the secondary. I think both of those units have gotten better going into 2024. Gonna go Oregon, but I think Texas again, giving some respect to Texas because they've gotten better in that secondary.
Yeah, I'm actually taking the Horns, and it's mainly because I think they're a more complete secondary. I am not in love with that safety room for Oregon. I wasn't in love with it coming into the year. I
Yeah,
don't think I'm
yeah,
proven wrong in any real way. It's like you kind of said it. I mean, they're a fine unit, but they're not Texas' unit. Andrew Makuba, to me, by far the best safety on this field. I thought he played or has been playing really, really well. You saw how he could deal with guys like Colson Loveland and be able to be an impact player for some of those positions that Texas didn't always have answers for. Tight end, their ability to work the middle of the field, their teams against them. I think they kind of have that figured out. And then I look, Malik Muhammad, I don't know that he takes a backseat to really anyone as a pure talent. I mean, he is
yeah.
unbelievable at corner. And then I like that Gilbaugh is playing good enough that it allows Jahdae Barron to bump out to that other corner, and they have a really good 1-2 punch.
Yeah, I was like questioning Jahdae Barron moving to the boundary cornerback spot because I thought he was so good at nickel, but he's looked awesome. And I'll ask you this: who do you think is the number one secondary in the country in terms of yards per pass allowed? It's Texas, only allowing
No,
4.6 yards per pass. The caveat
obviously,
is they've played Michigan, Oklahoma, like not a great. I know what you're gonna say. I'm just giving Texas their flowers. I may be a little bit of guilt for me picking Oregon. Wanted to give Texas their flowers. Dill, we went through it, and this is where I think the conversation gets really unique, right? For me, at least, I was picking Oregon. I feel like Oregon won the position battle. Like we picked more of Oregon's positions than we did Texas. But I'll ask you this: neutral site Saturday night game. Who you taking if these two teams were to square off?
I think I'm taking the Horns, and I think it's mainly because I feel like they have more aggregate difference makers, especially on the defense side of the ball. I still look I mean, I don't love that Ohio State offense. It felt like at times it was a little too easy for my liking, if you will. I didn't think they were always challenging that Ohio State offense. I didn't think they were trying to cover them as tightly. It felt a little bit like, okay, we're going to keep things in front of us. We're not going to give up big plays, which kudos to them. They didn't. And maybe that is the strategy you want to go with. But I like my defenses playing a little bit more with their hair on fire. And frankly, I think Texas will have the opportunity to show that that's what their defense is now against Georgia. I think they have the talent to do it. I think they have the difference makers at all 3 levels with guys like Alfred Collins and guys like Anthony Hill Jr. And then you got Malik Muhammad, Makuba, those type of guys. I just think Texas can probably play a bit of a different style on defense. And I think the offense will wash because I think they're both
See,
as good.
I'm going to take Oregon here, and what I disagree with is I think Oregon can play that style of defense. I think they just chose not to against Ohio State because I think the idea for Dan Lanning and Tosh Lupoy going into that football game was make Will Howard be consistent. Like, don't give him that 70-yard touchdown to Jeremiah Smith. Make him go 10 yards, 10 yards, 10 yards. And yeah, Ohio State put up 31 points, but that is a very, very good offense. I don't think Texas has seen an offense like that. So when Texas plays an offense like that, I'm interested to see how they deal with it. And you talked about difference makers. I feel like Oregon can go match for match with Texas in terms of difference makers. And quite frankly, I think they might have more difference makers on the offensive side of the football than Texas. This is going to be a
I don't think
extremely
so.
Like, and I'm probably talking with a little bit more conviction than I feel because, like, I wouldn't be putting any money in Oregon. I would take
Yeah,
Oregon, but it
I
wouldn't be
just
like
look at Texas. I feel like they have more capability and make a ton of negative plays from every different level. And I look at
I don't.
Oregon, like, do they have the linebackers to do
Make
that?
the plays.
Are their defensive ends those guys yet? Again, I was talking like I
Didn't
do
you
like
pick
what they have this
Oregon's
year.
defensive line over Texas?
Yeah, but it's very narrow. And then I look, I don't think the linebacker room is abundantly close. I
All
mean,
right, you're
it's
taking
not
Texas.
like Oregon are scrub linebackers, but they don't have an Anthony Hill. And look at the secondary. I think Texas secondary can be absolutely smothering if they want to be this year.
I think I see. I think Oregon's good too, and I just think that wasn't the game plan they had going into Ohio State. So the boys disagree. Now I really hope we get this football game. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys, and we'll talk to y'all later. Peace.